ecosystem side, what about the use cases? So this is not new news, but the perimeter is gone. There is no perimeter. So I'm now accessing an application. I'm in Budapest. I'm using my mobile device, connecting to an application in Amazon Web Services or Salesforce.com. So all that money we've invested in firewalls, in traditional protection around the perimeter, has become irrelevant in this use case. And actually, that's where a lot of the IT investment and security investment is still going, on that perimeter security. Absolutely important, but that's not going to solve all of our problems. And the use cases are exploding. So again, as I say, I've been in the IT security for a couple of decades now. So it was very much the case that initially it was around VPN, about remote access. And actually, that's still the main use case. When we talk about strong authentication, VPN is still the first use case organizations want. But that's now very closely followed by authentication to cloud applications, Office 365, Google Docs. And it's not just authentication. We're seeing more and more organizations looking to digitally sign information. And you look at regulations like PSD2, which require dynamic linking, so signing of data, linking that to an identity. So the use cases are becoming more sophisticated. And this is not just for employees, it's for partners, it's for customers and consumers in a government context. So the use cases are exploding, and the user expectations are also being risen as well. So we can no longer force a security solution on our users, and that's key. So presentation is that we're using the wrong tools. So we're like this guy here. He's got this massive wheel to pump up, and he's using a hand pump. Another example I thought of is when I learned to drive a car, you have to do an emergency stop. And I was taught, when you're doing an emergency stop, you brake, you start skidding, you then release the brake and reapply the brake, and you keep doing that, you keep pumping the brake, and that allows you to stop more quickly. So if I stop slowly, it's a user error, it's me that's at fault. But what do you get now? Now we get ABS. Now the car does that for me. So was that a user problem in the first instance, that I wasn't able to pump the brake fast enough? Or did I just have the wrong tool? Now I've got a car with automatic braking. It automatically does that, pumping the brake for me. So the tool is solving the problem for me. So that's just an example I was thinking of. Is it a user or is it the tools? So let's look at the tools we're currently using. So we're using passwords, and thankfully I don't have to tell you how weak passwords are. I think that's been covered this morning very thoroughly. It's not secure, and neither is SMS authentication. We've seen attacks stealing SMS one-time passwords and using those to withdraw money, millions of dollars worth of attacks. And questions and answers is really it's a single-factor authentication. Again, once I know the answers to your questions, I can impersonate you. But not only are these not secure, they're also a poor user experience. So if I've got passwords, I don't know here, how many people has got more than 10 passwords? More than 20 passwords? More than 30 passwords? Probably. You've probably got at least 20 to 30 passwords, or you've got one password and you reuse it 30 times. Neither of those solutions are fantastic, but maybe you're smart and put like a 1 or a 2 at the end of it, so that's going to help. But it's a bad user experience, especially when we're looking at mobile. When you bring up your phone, you just want to be logged in. You don't want to type in a long password with complex. It just doesn't work in a mobile world. And again, tokens, hardware tokens, and we sell hardware tokens, you know, that's absolutely fine. But from a user experience, I've got to have it with me, I've got to carry it around, the number's going to change and I need to wait for the next number. It's not a great user experience, but it is quite secure. Or what about smart cards? We still have a lot of our customers using smart cards, but in a mobile world they don't work. Apple haven't put a smart card reader with the iPad or the phone, so that doesn't really work in a mobile world. So I think we're using the wrong tools. This is what we're using today, and I think they're the wrong tools. They don't scale, they're not secure, they're not easy to use. And I don't want you to take my word for it, so during this presentation I will give you some nice independent validation of what I'm talking about, and this is the first example. So this is Gartner. So more than half of organizations will replace their identity and access management technology in the next 2 years. Why? Because the incumbent solution doesn't address the requirements. So this is from Gartner. And this was in June last year, so this is just 6 months ago. So if we want to turn our users into a line of defense, what tools do we need to give them? What do we mean by intelligent authentication? And I love this because this slide deck was prepared by a Canadian, so I love the fact that he used football as the example rather than ice hockey, so it shows that he's really tuned into a European audience. So let's look at some aspects of intelligent identity. So for users, it needs to be quick. I need to be able to log in and get access to my applications. It needs to be easy to use and actually, if possible, transparent. If you don't need to add friction to my access to the application, then don't. Just let me in. It needs to be versatile, so it can't just meet one use case. It has to be versatile to meet multiple use cases, multiple channels, for example. It should have some intelligence around reputation. It should have an idea of the context of the transaction. And I think we're moving towards continuous authentication. So at the moment, when you think of authentication, you think of it being a distinct event at the start of an interaction. I log in, and then I'm in, and I can do what I like. Continuous authentication implies that during the session, the trust of my identity and interaction is evaluated continuously during that session. So that's quite a powerful and quite a different paradox of thinking about authentication. Now for IT in the business, well, the IT wants security. They want it to be secure. And the digital team want it to be easy to use and easy to manage and produce a low friction user experience. And we need it to adapt. One thing that's very clear is that things are changing at a very rapid pace. So we want a solution that's flexible and can adapt to new use cases, new channels, and new applications. So let's look at the components of intelligent authentication. Well, we think it's got to be based on the mobile. The mobile is ubiquitous. It's a very personal device. Mine, I'm standing in front of you, my PC's down there, but my mobile phone's in my pocket. I'm guessing most of you have got your mobile phone very close to you at the moment. You probably haven't left it back at wherever you've come from earlier today, at your stand or so on. So it's a very personal device. I look after it. It's got my personal information, email and so on, and I treat it like a personal device. And it's very powerful. It's got lots of capabilities that, from a security perspective, we can leverage. We'll talk about those. So that mobile device should be able to authenticate me to workstations, to servers, to applications. It should give me single sign-on. So that becomes my credential, if you like. But we need to use that in a way that's adaptive. So we need to look not just at the credential on that device, but the reputation of that device. Has this device been known to be involved in fraud? And what's the context of the current interaction? And then finally, we can leverage biometrics, because that gives a very low friction authentication mechanism. So let's look at all three of those in turn. So there's several ways that you can use a mobile to authenticate an individual. We have a couple of options, but a very strong high assurance option is actually putting a virtual smart card onto the mobile device. So this is a PKI-based authentication, and as you know, a great thing about PKI authentication is that when you authenticate, you're not giving away the thing that you're using to authenticate. So your private key remains on the device. So that makes it very, very much more difficult to perform a man-in-the-middle or a man-in-the-browser attack, because you're not sharing your authentication credential effectively. But it also gives you ability to use that to log into Windows, for example. So Windows supports smart card login out the box. So we can use that certificate on a mobile device to log into our Windows workstation. So that's a really nice use case. You walk up to your PC, it recognizes once you get into Bluetooth range that you've got your smart card, which is on your mobile. The prompt comes up for your PIN, you type the PIN into Windows and you're logged in. And then if you're a user who isn't particularly careful about locking your PC, when you leave the area of your PC, it'll lock down itself because you're out of Bluetooth range. But we can use that to authenticate to VPN, to cloud applications, and we can also embed that into mobile management solutions such as Mobile Iron and AirWatch. Now with a mobile, we can also use that to authenticate to other channels. So we can use it to authenticate to kiosks, to ATMs. If we've got the right technology, you can even open a door with your mobile. That would be with an Android device using NFC. Because the virtual smart card we have on our mobile device is a PIV applet. So that gives us a good support of a range of different applications. So that's the credential. But how is that used? So this is the idea of using intelligence around the authentication process. So we can look at various aspects. Even before the user logs in, we can see what device they're using to connect with. So we can see what's the reputation of this device. And there are checks we can do. Is this device known to have been involved in fraud or identity theft? Is it stolen? We can do checks on whether it's jailbroken. We can see whereabouts in the world it is based on IP geolocation. And various aspects of that device. What time of day is it? Is this usual for this user? That can be put into a policy engine, along with what is it this user's trying to do. So based on that, we can determine how much friction we need to introduce for that interaction. If it's a low-risk transaction, and I'm coming from the office, from my normal IP address range, from my normal device, which we've fingerprinted, maybe I don't need to be prompted for any other authentication. So that becomes very intelligent, and the policy engine becomes quite key. And then finally, we can use biometrics in a couple of ways. We can use it as part of that passive authentication process. So as you're logging in, and we can use Touch ID, we can use the Face ID, or we can use biometrics in our own application to authenticate the user. And that needs to be fairly transparent. Or we can use it if the user's doing a particularly sensitive transaction. So now we want positive confirmation. Maybe they've logged in transparently, but now they're doing something higher risk. Maybe they're trying to pay their taxes and they're finally signing off on their taxes, or they're trying to transfer some money within a banking application. We can make them go through a more involved biometric authentication process. So you're introducing friction, but you're introducing friction where it's meaningful. And the user would understand that, because from their perspective, they are doing a transaction which they perceive as being valuable and risky. So that then your authentication is commensurate with the user's understanding of what they're doing. So here's various levels of intelligent authentication, but this picture tries to show how they can be leveraged and how they can fit together. So this is, again, it's a layered security approach, as all good security approaches need to be based on multiple layers of defense, not just a single control point. So we start off with the device. Oh, that's helpful. I can now see the screen in front of me. So we start off with the device, and as I say, when that user connects to that service, we can get the reputation of that device, we can find out if it's jailbroken, and we can put a fingerprint on that device so we know it's the same device coming back. So that gives us a level of assurance around the user. And then we put an identity on the device. And we can actually use a platform to do the identity proofing. So one of the areas of friction and delay around using mobile services is how do you initially bind a real identity of a user, a citizen, or a customer to their mobile device credential. So we can use the device itself to help us with that. We have a camera. We can have that user use the phone on their camera to hold up their identity document and have a live image of their face. We can compare the two, and we can associate that user with that identity. That may involve somebody on the help desk, or it may be able to be done in an automated way, depending on the risk and the environment. So that actually gives you a real identity in the real world bound to the logical identity on the user's phone. And at that point, we can issue a secure credential to that device, bound to that user, which we can associate with that individual. So once we've got that secure credential, the next level is then to apply this adaptive authentication, intelligent authentication. How much friction do we introduce at different points? And then when we need to, we can step up the authentication. And again, this is not my view or my company's view, this is also what Gartner are saying. So they're saying by 2022, which isn't actually that far away, 70% of enterprises will combine biometric methods with analytics, and with either mobile push models or embedded public key credentials across multiple use cases, from almost nil today. That's quite powerful. That's quite powerful. So they are predicting a massive change in the way we authenticate individuals, layering these aspects on top of each other and using PKI on the mobile device. So that's I think what I mean by intelligent authentication, but I also wanted to share with you some case studies. So now I'll share with you 3 examples of customers and how they're using this technology today. So this one is a nice one. It's a government organization. This is for their employees. To make it a bit more exciting, I chose a government organization who send their employees to space. They're based in the United States. You might be able to guess who they are. They've been using smart cards for a very long time. So we see this a lot. A lot of large organizations use smart cards to authenticate their employees, but they were finding this was introducing a lot of friction, difficult to use, causing frustration. And in their environment, because of their different systems, each user would need multiple smart cards. So anybody here using smart card authentication in your organization? Yeah, it's very common. So then they found that as they were using their mobile devices, suddenly the smart cards didn't work. As they were using SaaS applications, the smart cards weren't supporting that. So this was becoming a problem. So they are now using this embedded PIV applet mobile device on their mobile device, and they can use that mobile device virtual smart card to log into Windows, to log into VPN, and to log into their cloud applications. And they get single sign-on. And because it's a virtual smart card, they can have multiple instances of smart card on one mobile device. So they can choose which smart card they use. This is a different type of organization. This is a government organization again, but they have their employees out in the field. So these are not office-based employees. But what they were finding is that these employees would need to spend time in the office to do admin. So 70,000 users, but they've got to come back to the office to issue the digitally signed reports of what they've been doing during the week. And again, what they did is they integrated this time the virtual smart card into their mobile management, into their EMM solution. And what that gave them is the ability to do digital signing within email and authentication to web portals. So the business impact is that each employee can now spend an extra day in the field instead of being in the office, because they can submit their reports on their tablets, digitally signed, because of this integration of the virtual smart card in the application, integrating with their application suite. So very powerful, a big impact on the productivity of the 70,000 field inspectors that they have within their organization. So let's look at a customer or a citizen example. This is where we're looking at, in this case, healthcare, but effectively customers or citizens using a government healthcare. And this is for a web portal. So in this case, we're looking at using a two-factor authentication, might be an oath-based authentication, and this idea of the policy engine. So looking at device reputation, time of day, risk. So we're adding this intelligence to citizens coming in, where we have to let them use the application, and we have to deal with a world where we can't assume Java on the desktop, so we can leverage their mobile device for their authentication. And we can also give them self-service, so they can provision their own two-factor authentication credentials, which is important when you're going out to 700,000 citizens to allow them to manage their own credentials. But we also need to integrate it, in this case, with Oracle Access Manager. So it has to be integrated with the applications in use by this organization. And then finally, a banking example. So banking's going through, again, massive change at the moment. We're seeing PSD2 requiring strong customer authentication, requiring dynamic linking. And we're seeing in this example, this bank was using a wide range of different two-factor authentication options. So grid-based, knowledge-based authentication, device, geolocation, and so on. But they also wanted to be able to allow their customers to have a more seamless experience between channels. And this is one of the challenges of banking. You phone your bank, you visit the branch, you use mobile banking, internet banking, and you can use different authenticators depending on how you're dealing with your bank. And that's difficult, it's friction. So they, again, are using the mobile. So they can use this mobile credential that could authenticate to mobile banking, to digital banking through a web browser. But also, we can support the concept of cardless ATMs. And this is where we can show coming together with the physical world. So one solution that many banks are deploying now is the ability to instantly issue credit cards. So you lose your credit card or you open a new account, you can visit your branch and in the branch get a new credit card issued. When you leave the branch, you can start spending. So this is taking that one step further. So now you can walk into your branch, you can authenticate to an ATM or to a kiosk using your mobile phone. It can display a QR code. You hold the QR code up, so you're using your mobile device as an authentication to the ATM, which can then issue you a replacement credit card. So I think it's a great example of blurring the lines between physical and logical credentials and making it easy for users to authenticate to their organizations they're dealing with. So I'll leave you with that example. I think I've hopefully caught up a little bit of time. I'll just check if any of you have been typing questions. I'll just check see if I've got any of those. Yep.
But I still see a fundamental problem with the concept of using mobile phones. Right now, in the IT ecosystem, the weakest link is always the mobile devices. Today's mobile devices, operating systems are on the level of Windows 95 security. So you can not really speak about secure mobile phones. And the other picture that most people use a single mobile phone for work and their own private use, and then use the mobile phone as an entertainment device for their kids and so on. I see as a risky concept to rely on something that you can't rely on.
Yeah, and I think I'm not going to argue that a mobile phone is perfect security, but I think it's much better than what people are doing today in terms of usability and security. Mobile devices do have a more secure architecture fundamentally than a PC. So there is sandboxing, you can check to a level whether it's been jailbroken, and you can also check the reputation of the device based on databases that gather this information. So I think well, there's no silver bullet, and this is where the intelligence comes in of looking at the behavior of the user as well as how they're authenticating, because no authentication we can assume is 100% secure. But I think it's a big step in the right direction. It's cost effective, it's very usable, and it's a lot more secure than using passwords, for example. So I think it is a step in the right direction. While there is no perfect security, I'm not going to stand and say that mobile devices give you perfect security. There is nothing like a silver bullet. But I think it's a huge step in the right direction. And it's still an arms race. So we're still seeing it evolving. We're still seeing, hopefully we'll get more access to things like trusted execution environments and secure enclaves for storage of private keys, which we don't have across all operating systems and all mobile devices. So things are, still evolving. But even today, we're seeing customers leverage this and get a lot of benefits versus what they were doing before with passwords or with hardware tokens. So I've got no questions on the application. We are here. We do have a stand. If you go out of here and sort of carry straight on and go right, any other questions or discussions, then please come and find myself or my colleague, Irma. We're here all day today. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.